Arthur was the kind of guy who thrived on logic and precision. As an infrastructure technology expert, he had a knack for unraveling complex systems and solving problems that could stump others for weeks. At home, though, his life was far simpler, a quiet, predictable routine with his wife, Daisy. After 7 years together, Arthur believed their marriage was built on trust and love. One evening, Arthur decided to test a new telecommunication system he'd been working on. The project was challenging, and he wanted to ensure everything worked flawlessly before presenting it at work. Excited, he connected the devices and started making adjustments. Everything seemed to function perfectly, until an unexpected sound came through the headphones. It was a voice. Daisy's voice. At first, Arthur thought he'd accidentally picked up an external call. It wasn't common, but it could happen. But as he tweaked the channels, it became clear, this wasn't some random call. Daisy was speaking on the phone in the next room. He hesitated. Listening felt wrong, intrusive. But just as he reached to turn off the system, her words hit him like a freight train. So it's all set? Thursday at 8 at the Corpo Motel. I'll just tell him I'm out with the girls. Arthur froze. The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, like the beginning of a storm. He blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke he couldn't grasp. But Daisy's tone was matter-of-fact, leaving no room for doubt. Slowly, he removed the headphones, as though the simple act might alter the reality of what he'd just heard. The room was silent, save for the hum of his equipment. His thoughts raced. Had he missed any signs? Any clues? Daisy had been going out with friends more often lately, but he never questioned it. They trusted each other, or at least, he had trusted her. Arthur ran a hand through his hair and took a deep breath. He wanted to believe he was wrong, that he'd misheard or misinterpreted. But her words had been crystal clear. The idea of Daisy, his Daisy, arranging to meet another man at a motel felt unreal. He didn't know what to do. Should he confront her? Pretend he hadn't heard anything? Let her go through with it and confirm his worst fears? Feeling restless, he walked to the living room. There she was, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with that familiar smile he'd always loved. She looked so calm, so at ease, even laughing softly at something on her screen. For a moment, Arthur felt paralyzed. How could this same woman, who seemed so happy— Arthur was the kind of guy who thrived on logic and precision. As an infrastructure technology expert, he had a knack for unraveling complex systems and solving problems that could stump others for weeks. At home, though, his life was far simpler, a quiet, predictable routine with his wife, Daisy. After 7 years together, Arthur believed their marriage was built on trust and love. One evening, Arthur decided to test a new telecommunication system he'd been working on. The project was challenging, and he wanted to ensure everything worked flawlessly before presenting it at work. Excited, he connected the devices and started making adjustments. Everything seemed to function perfectly, until an unexpected sound came through the headphones. It was a voice. Daisy's voice. At first, Arthur thought he'd accidentally picked up an external call. It wasn't common, but it could happen. But as he tweaked the channels, it became clear, this wasn't some random call. Daisy was speaking on the phone in the next room. He hesitated. Listening felt wrong, intrusive. But just as he reached to turn off the system, her words hit him like a freight train. So it's all set? Thursday at 8 at the Corpo Motel. I'll just tell him I'm out with the girls. Arthur froze. The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, like the beginning of a storm. He blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke he couldn't grasp. But Daisy's tone was matter-of-fact, leaving no room for doubt. Slowly, he removed the headphones, as though the simple act might alter the reality of what he'd just heard. The room was silent, save for the hum of his equipment. His thoughts raced. Had he missed any signs? Any clues? Daisy had been going out with friends more often lately, but he never questioned it. They trusted each other, or at least, he had trusted her. Arthur ran a hand through his hair and took a deep breath. He wanted to believe he was wrong, that he'd misheard or misinterpreted. But her words had been crystal clear. The idea of Daisy, his Daisy, arranging to meet another man at a motel felt unreal. He didn't know what to do. Should he confront her? Pretend he hadn't heard anything? Let her go through with it and confirm his worst fears? Feeling restless, he walked to the living room. There she was, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with that familiar smile he'd always loved. She looked so calm, so at ease, even laughing softly at something on her screen. For a moment, Arthur felt paralyzed. How could this same woman, who seemed so happy and comfortable, be planning something so heartbreaking? He opened his mouth to speak but stopped. What could he even say? How would he explain overhearing her without mentioning the test he'd been running? And what if he was wrong? The possibility gnawed at him, holding him back. Without saying a word, he turned and went back to his office, shutting off the system, but even with the equipment powered down, Daisy's conversation echoed in his mind. He sank into his chair, staring blankly at the wall, as the sting of betrayal began to take hold. For someone who prided himself on logic, there was no way to rationalize this. His meticulously organized life had just unraveled in a single moment. In the days that followed, Arthur felt like a stranger in his own home. Daisy went about her life as if nothing had changed. She laughed at his jokes, commented on the news, and even suggested rearranging the living room furniture. To anyone looking in, they seemed like the perfect couple. But to Arthur, every smile and word she offered carried an unbearable weight. Every night was a battle. He lay beside her in bed, feeling the warmth of her body, but he couldn't shake the gnawing thoughts. Was he imagining things? Fooling himself? Or had their 7 years of love and trust truly started to crumble? No amount of logic could answer the questions swirling in his mind. All Arthur knew for certain was that his life, carefully built, solid and secure, was no longer the same. Arthur revisited his memories, piecing together moments he might have overlooked. Was it the day Daisy came home later than expected? Or the time she mentioned a new friend whose name he couldn't even recall? What once seemed ordinary now felt like fragments of a darker puzzle he didn't want to solve. The worst part was the silence. Arthur was the type of man who confronted problems head-on, but now he was paralyzed. Should he ask Daisy outright and risk hearing the truth he dreaded? Or should he wait and confirm it for himself? The not knowing, as painful as it was, felt easier to endure than facing the finality of betrayal. He hated himself for feeling this way. The cowardice only deepened the wound. That evening, while adjusting the kitchen clock, Arthur heard Daisy's phone vibrate on the counter. She was in the bathroom, and the screen lit up with a message. Just one word, Sam. Arthur's heart pounded. He didn't need to be a genius to connect the dots. Sam, the name she'd mentioned during the call he overheard. His eyes lingered on the phone, the temptation to pick it up almost unbearable. But crossing that line felt like stepping into a place he might never return from. When Daisy returned, she picked up the phone without a hint of hesitation. She smiled at Arthur, thanking him for adjusting the clock, and began scrolling through her messages. Arthur studied her closely, searching for signs of guilt or nervousness. But there was nothing. She seemed calm, even carefree, as if she had no secrets to hide. That made it worse. The next night, Arthur gave in to the gnawing curiosity. This time, it wasn't accidental. He turned on the telecommunication system in his office and adjusted the headphones. His movements were deliberate, heavy with guilt and grim determination. It didn't take long. He found the channel and heard her voice again. It's all set for tomorrow. I'll leave with the girls around 7, then meet you. Her words sliced through him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke or something he could rationalize away. She was planning to go through with it. Arthur pulled off the headphones, his hands trembling. The woman he loved, the one he had trusted completely, was willing to throw away everything they had built. He sat in his chair, staring blankly at the wall. For the first time, he realized there was no turning back. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. He needed to see it for himself. To witness just how far she was willing to go. And more than that, he wanted her to face the weight of her choices in a way she'd never forget. That night, after hearing Daisy confirm her plans, Arthur sat alone in his office, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. His world, once so secure, had been completely shattered. He wanted to scream, but no one would hear him. He wanted to cry, but the pain was suffocating. Yet, amidst the chaos, something shifted. Arthur resolved that he wouldn't let this betrayal define him. He wouldn't let it destroy him. He needed to act, not to save the marriage. He left the pizzeria and drove to a nearby hotel, booking a room for the night. He couldn't return home, not after what he had just set in motion. Standing in front of the hotel room mirror, Arthur barely recognized himself. His reflection bore a shadow he hadn't seen before, a weariness that aged him. But even in his exhaustion, he felt a strange sense of clarity. The night arrived, bringing with it a heavy stillness. Arthur sat in his car, parked across the street from the motel Daisy had mentioned. The area was quiet, discreet, perfect for secret rendezvous. He gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to confront her, to storm in and demand answers. But he resisted. The message he'd arranged would speak louder than any confrontation ever could. Shortly after 8 p.m., Daisy's car pulled into the lot. Arthur felt his chest tighten as he saw her step out, wearing a dress he recognized immediately. It was the same one she had worn on one of their wedding anniversaries, a dress he had once complimented endlessly, telling her how radiant it made her look. Now, she was wearing it for someone else. The sight was a punch to the gut. Daisy glanced around nervously, making sure she wasn't being watched, before quickly heading inside. Arthur's eyes followed her until the door shut behind her. Somewhere in that motel, the man she had chosen over him was waiting. Arthur didn't need to see him, he already knew enough. He picked up his phone and called the pizzeria. His voice was calm, almost unnervingly so, as he confirmed the delivery. The attendant assured him it was on its way. Minutes ticked by like hours. Arthur sat in his car, torn between staring at the motel entrance and fixating on his hands, clenched tightly on the steering wheel. Memories flooded back, nights they'd stayed up holding hands, laughing, planning their future together. He thought about the trips they'd dreamed of, the life they'd built. How could those moments coexist with the reality unfolding before him? Finally, he saw the pizzeria's delivery bike pull up to the motel. The driver, unaware of the drama he was walking into, parked at the entrance, checked the address, and handed the box to a motel employee. The pizza, along with Arthur's note, disappeared behind those doors. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. He could almost picture Daisy opening the box, her laughter fading as she read his words. "Enjoy your meal. I hope tonight carries as much weight as our marriage." And then he waited, the weight of the moment pressing down on him, knowing her world was about to shift just as his had. He wanted to be there, to see her reaction, but at the same time, he knew he couldn't bear to look at her directly, not in that moment. Minutes stretched into hours as he remained motionless in his car, every muscle tense. Then, the door to the motel room opened. Daisy emerged, holding the pizza box and the note. Her face was one of pure shock. She looked around as if trying to spot the sender, but the parking lot was empty, except for Arthur, hidden in his car, watching from a distance. She walked toward the delivery driver, still clutching the note with trembling hands. "Who sent this?" she asked, her voice shaking. The driver shrugged. "A man left it at the counter. He's gone now." Daisy stood still, frozen in place. It was as if the reality of the situation had just hit her, crashing down all at once. She looked at the note again, rereading the words Arthur had written. Arthur could see the confusion and panic spread across her face, even from where he sat. She muttered something to herself, crumpled the note in her hand, and turned back toward the room, but midway, something changed. Her expression shifted, and with quick steps, she made her way toward her car. Arthur's heart raced as he watched her start the engine and drive off. He knew exactly where she was heading, home, but when Daisy arrived, she wouldn't find what she expected. She wouldn't find a man waiting to forgive or listen to explanations. Arthur had planned every detail, and now the events unfolding were beyond his control. He stayed in the car for a few more minutes, watching the emptiness Daisy left behind. The room where she was supposed to spend the night with another man was now closed and silent. Arthur knew he had broken something in Daisy, but more importantly, he had regained control of his life. With that realization, he placed his hands on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and started driving, away from that place. When Daisy arrived home, the silence was the first thing that hit her. It was different, heavy, almost suffocating. She rushed inside, heart still racing, expecting to find Arthur sitting on the couch, perhaps looking hurt or angry, ready to confront her. But he wasn't there. The living room, which was usually warm and full of life, felt empty, soulless. She called out, "Arthur, are you here?" Her voice echoed through the house, but there was no answer. She walked into the kitchen, expecting to find him there, holding a cup of coffee as he always did when something was on his mind. But the kitchen was just as deserted. It was then that something caught her eye, the small tray where his keys usually sat, now covered in a thin layer of dust. The keys were gone. Daisy began to feel a knot form in her stomach. She hurried up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she opened the bedroom door, her heart sank. The closet door was ajar, revealing an empty space where Arthur's clothes should have been. No ties. No shoes. Just empty hangers swaying slightly, as if mocking her. She ran to the dresser, opening drawer after drawer. His socks, his neatly folded shirts, even the watch he always kept in the top drawer, everything was gone. It was then that reality began to sink in. Arthur had left. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Daisy grabbed her phone with shaky fingers and dialed Arthur's number. The ringing seemed to last forever. When his voice finally answered, it was distant, cold. "Arthur," she said, her voice more desperate than she intended. "Where are you? Please, come home. We need to talk." On the other end, Arthur's voice was icier than ever. "There's nothing left to talk about, Daisy. My lawyer will contact you in a few days." Daisy gasped. "No, please. Don't do this. I made a mistake. I know, but we can work through this. Please, Arthur, I love you." Arthur's laugh was devoid of humor, only bitterness. "You chose someone else, Daisy. You chose someone else and destroyed everything we built together. There's nothing left to save." Tears streamed down Daisy's face as she tried to pull herself together. His words cut deep, like blades. "I was confused, Arthur. It was a moment of weakness. I never meant to hurt you." But her words were lost in the cold finality of his. The damage had already been done. He could have hoped for a fresh start, a blank canvas. The apartment was modest, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, far from the chaos of his former life. It was exactly what Arthur needed: simplicity, a place where no one knew his name, where the weight of his past didn't follow him. As he unpacked his things, each item, every old photo, every piece of memorabilia from his past life, felt like it belonged to someone else. He couldn't help but wonder how it had all gone so wrong. But he didn't dwell on it. He couldn't afford to. Arthur spent the next few weeks settling in. The city was new, and there was something comforting about the anonymity it provided. He started working on rebuilding his life, not just financially, but emotionally as well. He had no intention of looking back at what he had lost, no desire to chase after a love that had already betrayed him. Still, despite the newness of everything, there were moments of weakness. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet, when he was alone with his thoughts, he would think of Daisy. He would remember her laugh, the way she would smile at him with those familiar eyes. He would remember their plans, their dreams of the future. But those memories soon grew dim as the reality of their marriage crumbled around him. Daisy's emails kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. She apologized, she begged, she promised change. But Arthur had long since stopped hoping for change in her. He had learned the hard way that action spoke louder than words. The more he read her emails, the more he felt convinced of the decision he had made. Daisy's pleas only reminded him of the woman she had become, someone he couldn't trust, someone who had shattered his faith in love. One evening, after a long day of work, Arthur sat at the small kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him, and opened a new email from Daisy. It was just another apology, another plea for forgiveness. But this time, as he read it, something clicked. "I did something terrible, but now I realize I didn't betray you. I betrayed myself. I lost the person who made me want to be better." Those words, as painful as they were, resonated deeply with him. In that moment, Arthur realized the truth: Daisy wasn't the only one who had lost. He had lost too. He had lost the person he once was, the man who believed in second chances, who trusted blindly. That man was gone, but for the first time in a long while, Arthur didn't feel sadness or regret. He felt something else, something he hadn't felt in months. He felt relief. He had chosen a new path. A path that didn't involve looking back, a path where he could rebuild himself and his life without the shadows of betrayal hanging over him. As he clicked the delete button on Daisy's latest email, he realized that it was time to let go completely. The past was over. He was free to write his own future. The next morning, Arthur woke up early. The city was just beginning to stir as he stepped out of his apartment. He walked the streets with a sense of purpose, the weight of his past finally lifted from his shoulders. There was no more pain, no more doubts. There was only the present, and what he would make of it. Arthur's new life was one of quiet determination. He had stripped away the excess, the clutter, the memories that weighed him down. Each day, he focused on the simple, functional aspects of his new routine: work, self-care, and occasional walks through the unfamiliar streets. His choices were deliberate, each one a step away from the pain, away from the life he had known. There were moments, quiet ones, when he would catch himself thinking of Daisy, her smile, their old inside jokes, the way she used to brighten a room. But those moments were fleeting. They didn't control him anymore. He was a man rebuilding himself, brick by brick, and with each new choice, the foundation of his life grew stronger. Daisy, on the other hand, was trapped in the silence of the life she had destroyed. She had tried to call him, sent messages and emails, each more desperate than the last, but Arthur had made his decision. He had turned his back, and Daisy was left in the wreckage of what remained. Her days were filled with regret, with questions she couldn't answer. How had she let it go this far? How had she lost everything so quickly? She would look at their old pictures, at the spaces in their home that once held shared dreams, but now felt cold and empty. The note Arthur had sent with the pizza was tucked away in a drawer, its message branded into her mind. She read it again and again, trying to understand, trying to grasp the full weight of what she had done. The words on that note echoed in her head like a constant reminder of her failure. "I hope tonight carries as much weight as our marriage." The note was a symbol of everything she had betrayed: the trust, the love, the future she had once believed in. There were no excuses, no words she could say to undo the damage, but the regret, the guilt, the realization that she had lost something irreplaceable. It was all-consuming. Daisy felt as though she were suffocating in the emptiness she had created, trapped in a world where her actions had irrevocably changed everything. Arthur, meanwhile, was moving forward. Every new choice he made, every small victory in his fresh life, was a testament to the strength he had found in himself. He didn't look back, not because he couldn't, but because he had learned that the only way to heal was to keep moving. And with each passing day, he felt the grip of his past loosen. he no longer feared the pain. Instead, he embraced the freedom that came with leaving it behind. Daisy stayed in that hollow place of regret, haunted by the choices she had made. She couldn't undo the past. She couldn't take back the moments that had led her here. All she could do was revisit the past in her mind, knowing she had lost the only person who had ever truly seen her, loved her, and believed in the future they could build together. And in the end, it was clear. Arthur was free. He had chosen a future beyond the wreckage of his past, while Daisy remained locked in a cycle of regret, unable to escape the consequences of her own choices. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.